Mario Kart Wii can still be played competitively via CTGP Revolution in 2022. That's why all the following information is relevant. This is also the only Mario Kart game where karts are absolutely useless. The best characters in this game are Funky Kong on Flame Runner and Daisy on Mach Bike. However, any character with these vehicles is still viable. The reason why Funky and Daisy are the best though is because speed is by far the most important stat in this game. Funky Kong has the best speed for his weight class, and Daisy has the best speed for her weight class. By the way, these tests on the screen took 20 minutes to film and probably another few minutes to edit. Thanks, me. Now I'm going to show you how to abuse the power of inside drift bikes, which are the fastest and easiest to control. What you're seeing on your screen right now is a wheelie, but let's go into greater depth and see exactly what's going on here. Mario's base speed is 82 and wheelie top speed is 94. When Mario initiates the wheelie, he starts accelerating up from 82 to 94, but in the 3 seconds he has to wheelie, he does not get to 94 km and the wheelie drops early. If you didn't understand anything I just said, the takeaway is acceleration sucks. So naturally, you're asking, how do you get around the acceleration? Well, every vehicle in this game can drift, and after drifting for a while, unless you're on automatic, you get a mini turbo, which, while going 98 km per hour from a mini turbo, you can actually go into a wheelie and you won't lose any speed. The reason for this is because you're entering a wheelie above its max speed, which in this case is 94. When you're entering a wheelie from 98, the speedometer drops down to 94 and you don't have to climb up at all. And that's how you stay going at max speed for an entire straightaway. While you're going 94, there's only a few things you have to watch out for in order to not lose your speed. Such as pressing the joystick left or right slightly, hopping to realign, getting bumped by another player, or the straightaway's not long enough and your wheelie comes down before you can get to another corner to charge another mini turbo to get another max speed wheelie. Now I'm going to show you how to avoid some of those problems. If a straightaway is too long for a single wheelie, then what you can do is initiate another wheelie right when the first one ends, which will prevent you from having to accelerate up from 82 km per hour again. Doing this perfectly is called a wheelie chain, and it's a frame-perfect input, 3 frames if you're on motion controls. Now for not turning in your wheelies. Turning in your wheelies are generally caused by bad alignments. So how do you prevent bad alignments? Well, it turns out that you actually have about 0.4 seconds after you release the mini turbo to wheelie, and still get max speed wheelie. Now it is considerably faster to wheelie instantly, it's also considerably slower to hit a wall from a bad alignment, or turn in your wheelie. So doing this shouldn't be a permanent fix to a problem, it should more so be a temporary fix until you get better. If you don't know, when you get bumped by another player while wheeling, you lose almost all of your speed. 2 well-timed wheelie bumps in a row, and it's actually faster to charge a standstill mini turbo in most cases. So how do you avoid getting bumped? You don't. If there's people around and the road is thin, a lot of the time it's actually a safer move to not wheelie. Wheelie bumps in general are a big reason why front-running tracks work as well as they do. If you're 5 seconds ahead in first, you don't have to worry about getting wheelie bumped and thus never have to put your wheelie down and lose time. This is part of the reason why you always see top 2 or top 3 break away on tracks like BC64. Now that you understand the basics of wheelies, let's get into drifting. Drifting is performed by pressing the hop button and then the direction you want to drift. From there, you can choose how aggressive you want your angle to be, and if you make it more aggressive, the mini turbo charges faster, and if you make it less aggressive, it charges slower. But I wouldn't be talking about this if it was that easy. So here's a few ways you can get mini turbos faster. Let's say there's a corner that's pretty gradual, but you also want to get your mini turbo out as quick as possible. Or you use Mach Bike. In either of those situations, you're going to need to learn how to soft drift. Soft drifting is drifting at the widest possible angle that still charges the mini turbo the fastest. Most people do this by putting their control stick in one of these 4 grooves depending on the direction they're going, and this is how people soft drift with most controllers. Now for delay drifts. This one's really simple, just hop and then move your control stick in midair. The reason this is faster is something about distance or something, but I really don't know. But hopping and then pressing left or right does charge your mini turbo faster. Let's veer off topic slightly to something called TF physics. TF physics is when you're drifting tight and then just before you go off of a ramp or surface that gives you air, you drift wide, and this gives you extra distance. Now if you don't know, airtime 99% of the time in this game is bad and you should avoid it at all costs. But some of the reasons you will want to get extra distance in the air is to do shortcuts like the gap jump or Toad's Factory Shroomless, which is where it gets its name from. But before people used TF for everything, they used spin drifts. A spin drift is basically using TF physics within a hop, and that's why people do it for things like the Mushroom Gorge gap jump to give them extra distance. In fact, the gap jump itself is a great example of how the Mario Kart Wii meta has changed a lot over the years. First, it was done with a normal hop, and then a spin drift, and then more recently, Arcintel popularized doing it with TF physics. Anyways, what exactly does a spin drift do? Well, aside from giving you air, it's a great way to go around obstacles. And it's also great for getting obscure alignments for really weird and awkward tight turns to avoid traps. And just like that, that's the basics of drifting and getting your mini turbos out as fast as possible. Generally, airtime is considered bad in Mario Kart Wii, but if you've spent even a second trying to get good at this game, you'll have heard that airtime is slower in every conceivable way. And although the fact that your speedometer does slowly decrease in speed while you're in the air is true, it's more complicated than that. When a player is confronted with a ramp, their two fastest options are tricking or wheeling. The faster option is generally situational because they both have their pros and cons. Tricking gives more air, which we know is bad, but in exchange for a sweet boost when you land, while wheelie generally gives more distance and less air in exchange for no boost. But over the years, players have found a way to make the best of both worlds, known as low tricks. On some ramps, you can do less air while getting a trick, which ends in you losing less speed from airtime and getting your boost quicker. Examples of these include Bowser Castle 3's Trick Bars, Coconut Mall's Invitrix, and Waluigi Stadium's Wall Bounce. But the most straightforward example I could come up with is Coconut Mall's ending low trick, where you hop over the ramp in order to get slightly less air while still being able to do a trick. In fact, in most situations, tricks are the way to go, and even in situations where wheelies are faster, tricks are a very close second when it comes to maintaining speed. I still have one more example, but in order for it to fully make sense, I have to talk about situations where it's faster to wheelie instead of trick. Examples of these include BC Wii's Hawk Ramp, Delfino Square's Dock and Double Shortcut, Mushroom Gorge's Shrooms, and DK Mountain's Slope section. The reason tricking Hawk Ramp is slower is because boosts don't stack on top of each other. At the bottom of the ramp where you land, there's boost panels, and if you have a trick boost and then end up going over those boost panels, your trick boost won't end up doing anything. And since wheeling gives less air, it's the faster option here. And I know about 1% of you already googled the world record or know what it looks like and know that they trick off that ramp. So I'll tell you that the reason that they trick off of it is because they land sooner on the track, allowing them to get the full trick boost before they reach that set of boost panels. That's the same reason why it's not faster on Delfino Square's Double Shortcut either, but instead of a boost panel, this time it's just a mushroom boost. Yeah, that's right, mushroom boosts cancel out tricks too, so if you're goldening off a ramp and you know it's gonna last until the landing, you should never trick off the ramp. But Delfino Square Dock and DK Mountain's mountain section are interesting, because there are no boost panels or shroom spots where you wheelie off, so why is that faster? Well, as I said at the start of the video, a wheelie lasts 3 seconds, well filming that actually realized it was more closer to 4.5, and if you're in the air during this time, your wheelie stays intact. And if that wheelie continues to stay intact by the time you hit the ground again, then you just kept all your wheelie speed without using a trick ramp. Sure, it's not as good as a trick boost, but that extra distance can come in handy. And Mushroom Gorge is quite simple. The mushrooms cancel out your trick boost, so it only really makes sense to trick on the mushroom before you hit a solid surface that you can use your trick boost on. And now that I've talked about all that, you are now ready to comprehend the best example yet. Mushroom Peaks. Mushroom Peaks is arguably the most infamous custom track ever created by mankind, and its infamous mushroom section has been making children and man-children alike turn the Wii off and leave their gaming setup in a fit of rage whenever it gets picked online for over a decade now. And the reason for that is because some of the distances between the mushroom pads are actually too big to make without using some of the techniques I just talked about. Now, I am aware that mushrooms have their own very specific set of physics, but we don't have time to get into that right now. Players actually start by just drifting off the first mushroom because drifting off of a ramp gives you lower air, and then the next mushroom don't trick or wheelie because you can't initiate wheelies in midair or on bouncy mushrooms. Then you trick off the next mushroom because getting extra height is the only way you can get extra distance to make it to the shroom right before the green mushroom where you don't trick, so you don't get too much speed, and then you wheelie off the green mushroom because you can't do it on any of the other mushrooms, and then you wheelie off the next bouncy mushroom, which gives you more distance, and then on the mushroom after that your wheelie is still active, which means you can trick and wheelie at the same time, giving you an insane amount of distance and air, making it to the final mushroom and then finally back to solid ground. And if you understood that, then you know everything you need to know about ramps and airtime in Mario Kart Wii. But it isn't Mario Kart without items, so we gotta talk about item theory. Item theory as a whole is extremely complicated, so we're only gonna focus on what I think are the two most important things to know. First, we're gonna start by understanding the basics of the best item in the game. The shock shrinks every player on the map for a limited amount of time, except for those in stars, megas, bolas, cannons, and the forever after. The shock is only available in rooms with 6 or more players, either 30 seconds after the race starts or 30 seconds after its previous use. And the most reliable way to get the item is to either be an 11th or 12th, preferably 12th, and hoping that whatever spiritual being you believe in decides to give the shock to you. As for dodging, you're gonna need to have one of the items mentioned previously, and then direct your attention to the minimap. The reason for this is that every other item you can pull in last enhances your mobility in a way that you can see on the minimap. Goldens and triple shrooms make the player move faster and oftentimes through off-road. Bullet goes at ludicrous speeds. The star doesn't really speed them up, but rather allow them to go through off-road. And then when you realize they do have shock, you have to think to yourself, when would I use this? Well, the answer to that question varies from player to player. Let's say you're in a worldwide and you see a colossal idiot named Little Timmy who probably has straight Fs on all of his Summoning Salt Mario Kart Wii key checkpoint classes, who has a whole 5k VR to his name. You can bet that when he gets the shock, he's more likely to spam it than most, which means you should get in your dodge items earlier than you might otherwise do. But what about someone like XX Pro Gamer Hacks XX with quad 9s to his name? Well, to predict his shock, You're going to need to memorize all the item set locations on the map, because the most effective way to use the shock is often to chain it into the next item so you can get a powerful item while other players are small. Obviously this depends on the track, but a lot of the time shock is used on the last set of the track on lap 2 or the first set on lap 3, but they might end up using it earlier than they want to if they're really far behind. A tip I wish I would have learned sooner was that since 11th can pull shock just as likely as 12th, they're both equally likely to chain it at the set. So if you have a dodge item, don't hesitate to use it like 5 seconds before they actually make it to the item set. And bonus points if you can cover multiple sets with one dodge item. Like here on Toad's Factory, there's an item box on every conveyor here and a set right after. And if you use your dodge item correctly, you can dodge if a player chains the shock in any of these spots. Now going from the best item in the game to the absolute worst, the Thundercloud. Thunderclouds are most commonly pulled in 4th, but can be pulled from 3rd through 8th in a 12-player room. There are 2 things you can do to try to avoid the plague of a TC, and the first of which is really simple. When you're in 4th through maybe 6th, just don't cycle boxes as much. Another fun fact about TCs is that only one TC can be in play at a time. This means that if someone else has a TC on the racetrack, there is a 0% chance that you can pull one as well. If you're unaware, you can get your item faster by pressing the item button while the roulette is spinning. But if you're in 4th and it's a close pack, it actually decreases your chance of a TC by letting the item box cycle. The reason for this is that if 5th place hits a box right after 4th place, but they spam their box and you don't, if they pull a TC, it is a 0% chance that you can pull one, even though it's more likely in 4th. And this also applies for the other positions behind you that are able to pull the TC. Let's say you're in 4th, it's a really close pack, and 5th through 8th spam their boxes. Despite you being more likely to pull it from a statistical point of view, 5th, 6th, 7th, and 8th all roll the dice before you do. And that's the very basics of item theory. And also, the end of this video.